Well, first of all, yeah, welcome everyone to Drupaldelphia. I'm glad this is the first session. It's pretty cool. Hopefully you guys are excited to be here today and enjoy the conference. And thanks for coming to the session, Drupal 8, the missing parts. This should hopefully be a fun session. Let's go that. So yeah, Drupal 8, the missing parts. This talk has come out of dealing with training with new devs. It's a lot of stuff that's been bouncing around in my head as a Drupal developer, how I want to run projects. So it's stuff that if you're unfamiliar with Drupal or if you're a configurer, this is where all this comes from. So first of all, who am I? Pete Inge. I'm a senior developer at Blue Cadet here in Philly. I've had about 10 years of freelance experience in the web world, and I've worked professionally on projects from D5 all the way up to D8 now. Currently at Blue Cadet for about 2.5 years. I like to consider myself a problem solver. I like solving problems, whether they're client problems or problems in the web and Drupal. And that's where I do my stuff. If you want to contact me, feel free to email pinge@bluecadet.com. I'm not a big social media person, so if you find me on social media, I might not respond to you because I just don't ever look at it. And then these slides are going to be up on GitHub. That's the only thing that you should have to write down today. GitHub.com, pingevt, d8-missing parts. And all the slides will be up there. They'll all be in Markdown, but I'll also have a PDF if you want to see them as well. But just a little bit about Blue Cadet. Blue Cadet, this is actually an image that was just taken yesterday. This is the world premiere of this. We're getting all new photography. So this is the first time this has been shown. So we're an agency established in 2007, Emmy Award-winning digital agency that creates world-class websites, mobile apps, interactive installations, and immersive environments. We collaborate with leading museums, cultural institutions, universities, progressive brands, and nonprofit organizations to educate, engage, and entertain. Overall, we do experience design. We partner with mission-driven organizations to create a broad suite of products and environments. We don't really consider ourselves a Drupal shop, but we really use Drupal for a lot of things that we do. That's Blue Cadet. So first of all, who is this talk for? Well, anyone interested in getting better in Drupal. Hopefully, even if you've been experienced in Drupal, you'll pick up one or two things from this. Otherwise, site builders, anybody who considers configures a lot but doesn't really get under the hood or into the code. Any themers hopefully can pick up some things as well. And beginner coders. And what we'll cover today. So again, we won't be diving into as much code. I'll be going over some more of our ideas and methodologies of how we do things. Hopefully you can dig into it later, Google, all that fun stuff. There is a lot of stuff out there about Drupal, as I'm sure you're aware of. And I have a bunch of links at the end of this as well that if you download the talk, you'll get it. And actually I have a couple more commits to push up. So if you want to wait till the end of the day before downloading that, you'll get more stuff. So yeah, grab a bag of ideas, methodologies, and hopefully some best practices. So just to give you a little bit of an outline. One, I want to look into data and how we transform data. Some of this stuff is pretty basic, but I wanted to bring this into this talk. And then second, we're going to get into content, how we deal with content authors, different methodologies of what we do. But before we dive in, I just want to talk a little bit about why I personally and why we at Blue Cadet make decisions that we make, why we get into stuff. So first of all, one of our things is customization is key to taking your site to the next level. Just configuring everything is great, but when we really want to take everything to the next level, we have to get under the hood. We have to do work. We have to do the development side. Drupal is very data-centric. And it can be very confusing to content authors. So we do a lot of headless approaches or decoupled approaches. When you get into that world, then clients often are confused easily. So that's something that helps us decide what we do. We also want to do it the Drupal way. This has a lot of different reasons why. I always tell developers there's always 10 ways to do something, but 5 of them are probably correct. So if we do it the Drupal way, it's better to debug, easier to debug. And for me personally, I have this mental checklist of how I go through a site and how I debug the site. So by doing it the Drupal way, it's a lot easier for someone else to debug. Like I said, I look at my own code that's like 6 months old. It's not that old, and I wonder why and how I did it, and I usually blame it on somebody else, and then I'm like, oh wait, I did do that. A lot of that's due to timing, due to project deadlines and that kind of stuff. It's part of our jobs, but we should always be thinking about the next developer down the road. We want to make things as easy for them because they're going to be the ones dealing with it. So first, when I get into this data section, data with any CMS, we're really data centric. Like the first thing is dealing with the data. We need to transform that data. We're inputting raw data somewhere in these fields. We want to transform that data and deal with it however we need to. Most of the time we're dealing with the websites with Drupal, but we're also thinking about headless approaches. And then we present the data to our audience. Again, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So we want to dive in first. So the first thing is libraries. These, if you're dealt with Drupal 8, again, most of the stuff is going to be focused on Drupal 8, but a lot of these do apply to Drupal 7. This is one that's very Drupal 8. Methodologies are definitely for Drupal 7, but these are specific to Drupal 8. So libraries, I won't go too deep into it, because you should, if you're getting into developing modules and themes, you should know what the libraries are. And there's a lot of information, good information out there about it. But basically, we can group style sheets in JavaScript into these libraries. We can add them where we need on the site, and we don't have to have these big, long JavaScript files or anything like that. And helps with optimization, obviously, splitting up what we need to where and when. A good example of this is we have, this is the Independence Visitor Center here in Philly. We're working on launching their site next week, I think, actually. So we have slideshows, and we use Flickity for a lot of our slideshows. So obviously we have the Flickity JavaScript, CSS. We have our own custom JavaScript and CSS over top of that to customize it for our site. And then that's all in one library. When I have this one multi-value field, I can only include that library on that page, on that spot, when I need it. So library is usually defined in your module or your theme. So let's move on to preprocess and alter functions. So preprocessors, alters, well, hooks are really the key to building block of Drupal development. So what is a hook? Hooks are specially named functions that a module defines. This is known as implementing the hook, which are discovered and called at specific times to alter or add to the base behavior or data. This is known as invoking the hook. This is straight from Drupal.org somewhere. The things are at the end. The links are at the end. So first of all, I just want to talk a little bit about the difference between alter functions and preprocess functions. Alter functions are usually taking some kind of a data structure and modifying that data structure. Preprocess functions are modifying variables that we're going to use in our templates later on. So that's one little thing, and these are all over the place. We use, most of our custom code is going to be in the preprocess function. We do a lot of customization, just manipulating all the data and doing all of our logic for how we're showing and hiding or adding in other pieces of content. And again, I bury a lot of code in preprocessors. Like I said, 80% of our code is probably going to be in some kind of a form alter or the preprocess function. And again, we like to really remove our logic from our template files. Template should be for presentation, not for logic. D8's a little bit better about this, but it's it's a good idea to keep your logic outside of your template files. So again, just a quick, easy example for this. We have this call out, we have this fun little link at the bottom, we have this arrow. There's like hover animations and all this fun stuff with it. But you can't normally do that on a link field. You have to use a preprocessor to add the icon in that, the custom markup around that. So let's get a little bit deeper. Override fields. So a lot of times we use override fields. We'll have like maybe a short title for a teaser. It's optional. We don't really need it. So we use a preprocessor to handle that part of it and take that part. And actually add any custom dynamic markup. So just working on a thing that we're inserting a Google map. It's all done in the preprocessor and creating themes and stuff like that. So now we get on a little bit deeper. Display formatters. I really like display formatters. But first of all, hopefully you've seen a page similar to this, where we can, the Manage Display tab. But first of all, what is a display formatter? So really, in essence, it's taking our data we were talking about before, we're manipulating it and creating the rendered markup. So if we think about a link field, we have our link, we have our link text, we have our target or something like that, some other attributes for that. And that's what we're putting in the back of our node in our forms. And then when we actually want to put it on the page, we have, for the link field itself, we have the two different display formatters. We have a default link, or we have separate link and text. So they're taking that data and they're displaying it two different ways. So that's what the display formatter is doing. And why should we use display formatters? Well, I like using them because, first of all, they're kind of the Drupal way. Going back to the whole thing of, we want to do it the way Drupal's doing it for everyone else that's going to look at the site later on. It's a part of the UI already, so we can easily go in there. A site configure can use this later on. And next is also reusability. So I can use it across multiple fields or field types. I can use it also on multiple projects. If I have something that I really like, I can use this code to use on multiple projects. The other thing with that too is, if we think about preprocessors, those are usually like one-off. I need to do something very specific. It's in that preprocessor, or like a hook node preprocessor or something like that. Where display formatter, we want to use it across multiple fields, not just in one spot. And again, with debugging, this is all helps with part of the debugging process. If I look at this and my field's not even being rendered, then I know that's probably one place to look first. Again, this is just kind of an image in the background. We're not really going to go over a lot of code specifically, but the display formatter is actually fairly simple to start learning. I oftentimes just want to tweak one little thing from one of the core display formatters. And so what I'll do is I just take their class and copy and paste it, create my new class, and just tweak that one little thing. So it's really easy to reuse and learn from the core modules and the modules that are provided. So this was just an example for the Independence Visitor Center. We have these accessibility fields, and it was initially going to be a little bit more complicated. So I went down the display formatter route, but it ended up being just Boolean fields. It was, if it's checked, we're going to display this. If not, I don't want any markup. I don't want anything to show up. And we're also adding in the icons for these fields. So on the top there, that's what's being displayed. The bottom is the kind of the back-end form. So we just have simple Boolean fields. But using this display formatter, I could hide all the markup that I don't want when fields are off. So it was a good way to do that. Also, display formatters have the settings with them. So you don't always have to have a super specific display formatter. So you can, for your project, if you realize, you need a couple of different options, then you have the settings on the display formatter that you can tweak and do stuff that way, which is a lot of fun. Next is services. So this gets really abstract, and there's a lot more to services that are really cool, but are kind of a little bit out of the scope of this talk. So first of all, what is a service? Well, this is what I found on Drupal. A service is any object managed by the services container, which explains a lot. If you can understand that. But really, what we want to think about with services at the very basic and simplest level is that it's creating a class for you to reuse throughout the site. So again, it gets much deeper and pretty cool, and as far as I'm concerned, very undocumented at the moment. We just had an issue yesterday. We were trying to deal with some images and image management for like derivative images, not just the original images, but derivative images. And I knew I'd done something before, and it took me about 45 minutes to figure out how to do it again because it was a service. I just couldn't remember which service it was, and I was like diving through all my old code. So services are really handy, really useful. I think have a lot more place to be used in Drupal 8 if we understood them a little bit more. I think I could probably do a whole talk on services. But this really takes the whole object-oriented thing to the next level. So we're providing a lot of usability and reusability for how you want to manipulate your data throughout your site. So just kind of as an example, as a quick example, if we think about like a smoothie maker, put all this bunch of stuff into it, we always get a smoothie afterwards. So we have this class, we can easily use what we want with it, and we always get the same result out of it. And for an actual example, we had taxonomy terms that had SVG images attached to them that we were using throughout the site. We used them in different ways, and I was redoing the same code over and over again. I was grabbing my taxonomy term, I was grabbing my SVG image, I was theming my SVG image, and had to print it out in the link with the taxonomy term itself. And it was probably about 20 lines of code, but I was doing it over and over and over again. So I created this service, which is basically just a class in PHP that I gave it the taxonomy term, it returns, and I give it the taxonomy term, I say I want a rendered array, I get my rendered array. And I can call this service, no matter where I am in the theme module or on my own custom module or a class or a controller or whatever, I can always grab this service very easily and just get what I need out of it. So this helps, again, on large teams. You might have someone who just creates your services for different pieces, and your other developer, a junior developer, doesn't need to know the ins and outs. They just use this class. It's great. It's handy. Again, there's a lot more into the services, but that's that for now. Good thing to look into and understand. Next is tokens. I like tokens as well. I got into tokens a while ago, but I'm sure if you've been in the back end of Drupal, you've seen this at some point throughout Drupal. This is where you can find all your tokens, and pretty much anytime, Drupal provides a lot of tokens by default out of the box, which is great. But again, going back to the whole thing of where customization is really key, there's a lot of things I can't access and a lot of things I can't get to the way I want to. And I remember the one time I was just really tired of it. I was like, I'm going to jump into tokens. I thought it was going to be really hard. It's actually not. It's actually pretty easy. It's pretty straightforward. And I would encourage, if you guys are using tokens at any place, understanding how to create your own tokens is a really good thing. Again, one of the big things is we use these override fields. So there's no easy way to really do that in tokens as far as I understand. So I create my own tokens. We can do that easily. And to implement a token, it's just two hooks. We have the hook token info, which implements, just gives the definition. I have something on my node, and I can replace it. And then the other one is the hook tokens, which actually does the replacing. It says, hey, I have this node. Give me whatever you're told me this token is going to do. And it's pretty straightforward. There's a little bit more of how to know which token it is, but you should be able to Google that and figure that out. Again, tokens, we use them a lot for path aliases. So we want certain data in our node or something like that to create our path aliases. And I use them in meta tags a lot because we like to get specific data. We don't have to have the content authors deal with meta tags and the data that meta tags. That, to me, is they just always seem to not get the meta tag stuff. So we use tokens a lot for meta tags. And again, we want that specific data. We can usually pull the data out of the node very easily, but it's also we want to massage it a little bit to get it into meta tags. So second, this is I think the more fun part. We want to get into the content and how our site authors really kind of interact with our site and our data, and what we do to help facilitate that and make that a lot easier for them. So let's talk about something simple first. First is form states. If you guys are all familiar with contextual fields in Drupal 7, this is basically what is under the hood with contextual fields. It's simply adding a way to clean up our forms a little bit. Basically, the big thing I use is show and hide. There's more functionality to it, but it's basically most of what I do is show and hide fields based on different values in your forms. We want to lead our content authors through the data and through these forms. Some of these forms I've had to scroll because there's just a lot of data on one node, which as far as the data is concerned, I think is a good thing in some of the stuff that we've had, but also it's overwhelming for a content author. So using tabs, using all the different stuff that we have, but then also using these form states to help clean up the look a little bit of it. And I'll show you this guy right here. So basically here this is a paragraph bundle. We use paragraphs a lot. This is a paragraph bundle. One, we have an override thing. So we have all this data. We have a title, a featured image, a description, and a CTA link. Now we can override it with another node if we want. So there's that part of it. And then we also have this badge that we can put on it. And it's just basically a color and a little piece of text. So that whole thing looks really annoying. But if I play this video, I can click that. I hide all this other stuff. I use my override field. And then my badge too. If I want a badge, now I can expose these other fields. And form states are a little bit tricky, but it's basically just JavaScript. If this field has this value, show or hide another field. So again, they're a little bit annoying, I feel like, to debug and try to figure out the first step, but once you get that going, they're a really great way to clean up the forms and help provide that way through the forms for everybody. Next, option fields. So this is not a Drupal word, this is what we kind of call it, the option fields and preprocessors. Again, we usually mainly use this with paragraphs. So how many are familiar with paragraphs or not familiar with paragraphs? So a lot of people familiar, sorry. So paragraphs are basically Lego bricks. A lot of different types, a lot of different sizes. You put them all together, you create an object. Again, paragraphs, we can have different entities to build our content out. So a lot of times we get a lot of fields and a lot of stuff going on with it. So we have, again, these long forms, which are good, but we use these option fields to help eliminate too many things going on in the background as far as the dev is concerned. We can help define layout and content, and these fields actually don't show up on the front end, but they help with our theming. So this is for the Man Center, a website that we just launched. Man Center is the music venue here in Philly. So we were given this design of 4 different call-out styles. Data-wise, they're pretty much exactly the same. They have a title, they have a description, they have a link, they have an image. But design-wise, they're very different. They're left and right. We have circle and square images. We have different colors. If you can see it on the wall, there's like a word in the back here. And then there's like shapes in the back over there. So how do we do this in the form? Well, back in the day, I've done it before where, I'll create a different paragraph bundle for all 4 of those, which is really annoying. And you definitely don't want that. But this is what we ended up with. So we have one, we call it the half-width callout. I love naming paragraph bundle. It's always a mess in figuring out names. But basically, we have all the data that we need. We have the label, we have the image, we have the description, we have the callout. And at the bottom here, we have these different option fields to create all these different options. One of the big things with this site is we have all these different colors. So it was fun to deal with, but we also had to figure out how to deal with colors. This is what we came up with. Everything that we have has a color option on it. And so then that just adds to our class names in our paragraph bundles, and where our colors are all based through CSS, which is a great option. But then with the image alignments and image shapes, so we can define color, we can define image alignment, and define image shape, and define the background shape and the background message. And these fields never show up on the front end. No one sees them on the front end, but they're actually building a lot of our class names in these paragraphs. And that's how we get the different arrangements, different styles, different colors. We have, I guess it's on the next slide. I think, 96 different options to display the same data. And that's just with all the different colors mainly. But again, going back to the data-centric approach that we've talked about, this data is very specific. We can do anything we want with this data. These option fields can help us show it and present it differently. If for some reason we have this same paragraph that we want to put out to push to some other service, we don't have to worry about those option fields. We don't have to ask, is it, do we have a half-width callout that has a circle image? No, we don't care about that. We're going to put the image out. So having these option fields helps us, define the style and the presentation of it, but we keep the data as data. Taking that one step further, we do settings pages. And that line on the wall is perfectly aligned. Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool. So again, settings pages and preprocessors. So what we did before was on a paragraph or a node level. This takes it to a kind of a more global level. So we do a lot of these options at a global level. So we have a settings page. We do a custom form, create that in the admin side, put it in the admin side. So this right here again goes back to the Man site. This is, you'll see at the bottom of an event page, and they have all these different options. So if you know the Man Center venue, they have the outdoor seating, outdoor lawn, and depending on the show, they have a lot of different shows, a lot of different types of shows. Different things are allowed. So some you can drink, some you can bring food, some you can't bring food. You can bring your lawn chair, you can't bring your lawn chair. And trying to figure out how to do this easily, globally, and not having to bake it in. So one of our key requirements was that everything had to be editable. So if next year they decide they want to change the icon or change the text underneath it, if you look at the chairs, it says lawn chairs are not permitted for this performance. Well, maybe next year they want to lawn chairs no longer exist and we want to call it something else. They want to be able to edit it at a global level. And then again, it was pretty simple as far as it's just kind of a Boolean. It's I can bring something or I can't bring something. I can do something or I can't. And I didn't want to break all this stuff into like a field config. One being baked in the config. I can't edit it easily. So that was we tried to throw that out right away. And then also I didn't want to have to like redo this on every node page. I wanted it at a global level. So this is the node form at the back. The actual form itself was really messy, and I think I forgot to put the image up here. But basically, it's just a custom form. We say, hey, if I can bring food, what's my title? What's my icon? What's my text? And then the backend form, when they're creating the event, they just say, hey, I can bring food, picnics are allowed, alcohol is served, and blankets are allowed, and everything shows up from that global config on every event. Every event has the same terminology and an icon. So being able to do this kind of global settings, we can put that stuff all throughout the site without having to edit it in multiple places. Another big one that we do similar things for is like social media. So your links to your Facebook pages and Twitter and all that kind of stuff, we have that one setting in one spot, and then we can reuse that wherever we want throughout the website. If they change their handle or the tag or something, they don't have to go throughout the whole site and change every time they use Facebook. The next one, been getting into this a lot more lately and actually liking it. So CK Editor plugins, now with Drupal 8 kind of standardizing on CK Editor, it's also helped a lot just because we're not having to deal with all different kinds of WYSIWYG editors. But the client, I've always found the client always wants more functionality in the WYSIWYG. Every time we start talking about something, they're like, oh, I want to do this. Or they're copying and pasting from something else and trying to throw a bunch of stuff into it. Our typical response, and my typical response is like, no. Like, I just don't want to do it. Part of it. But really, is that really the best answer? Like, I don't know how many have you dealt with the same way or same thing or not. There's a lot of things you can put in a WYSIWYG, but probably shouldn't be in a WYSIWYG sometimes. But we want to have some cool dynamic stuff sometimes, so we also should look into this. The con to this is really we have to kind of learn the new system. CK Editor, how they work, how they do their things, and how we bridge that into Drupal. It took me, I think, about 2 days to kind of really dive into it and get our first stuff going. So it wasn't huge, but it took a little bit of time to kind of figure out that whole new ecosystem. Overall, though, I think this really improves the admin experience. And going back to that whole thing, one, we were solving problems that the client wanted, but also we were able to not have all this, like, sometimes we've done some like crazy things to get a small little thing, and it's just good to have it in the WYSIWYG. So for an example, again, this is the man site. So this is a simple text-heavy page. It's 3-4 levels down, but we were given these like shape background options, and immediately my mind went to like, how do I figure out like if we do so many words and so many paragraphs and all out of shape? And it was not very fun to go down that road. That was a dark path. Because that was fun. And I didn't want to do like a separate WYSIWYG for each one of these paragraphs because that's kind of annoying. We had one site where we kind of did that, and I did not ever want to touch the content on that site. But what we did was we created a cool little plugin. So now in our WYSIWYG we have this little shape button on the left, and it brings this pop-up. I can select my background shape. I can select the position, I can select the color. Again, everything had to be colored, so we could choose all these different colors, which is great. I think the designers really did a great job on this site. But and if you can see in the background here, it's a little bit dark, but you can actually drag and drop, or drag the shape around, so if you put it in the wrong paragraph, you can drag it down to the next paragraph. So it's kind of cool. And there's like more about like templates and stuff. We're working on the IBC site, and we have like different columns and stuff, which was actually really easy to create. So it helps give a lot more flexibility in the WYSIWYG without the content authors having to know HTML and all that fun stuff, because they try to do that, and then it breaks everything because they don't usually know how to do HTML. So I think that's all I want to say about that. But yeah, so these are great. I've been getting into these a lot more and trying to understand them a lot more, and the possibilities of them. I think this really goes along the whole line of improving the author experience. we can really get in there and do these little minor things within, like, especially these text-heavy pages, and have a lot of cool stuff to them. Next thing I want to get into is batch processes. So the batch API in Drupal is pretty cool. So first of all, what is a batch process? Functions allowing forms processing to be spread out over several page requests, thus ensuring that the processing does not get interrupted because of PHP timeout, while allowing the user to receive feedback on the progress of the ongoing operations. That was a lot. But basically, we can do large operations on a large data set in Drupal, and not worrying about PHP timing out, all this kind of fun stuff. We do a lot of this typically in our dev side of the work before a site launches, but it's also can be used for, while a site is live if you have the right use case for it. Again, this is just a snippet of code. I actually forget where it's from. Don't necessarily look at the code as much. That's just fun stuff. But we do quick updates. So one of the things that we do a lot of is for migrations. We kind of do a two-stage migration. We typically take migration. We'll take that data into Drupal, and we'll keep that as our raw data. We don't touch that. And then we do a second migration from those fields into the actual fields that we're going to use on a node. Number of different reasons. Usually, you have to massage that data, and we usually do it wrong the first time. And the client's like, oh, it was supposed to be something else. And so we have to redo it again. So having that kind of two-stage approach helps us a lot. And that second stage we typically use through this batch process, and we can just click a button, everything happens, and the client's like, hey, this is great, hopefully. So using these batch processes can help do large tasks very quickly, very easily. You realize, so one of the big ones that happens a lot is we have our WYSIWYG editors, our text editors, and our text display formatters, or not display formatters, the format text option. And we ended up creating a new one, and then we have to change all the old text that we migrated to this new display text formatter. So I've done that one a lot, where it's just going back, resaving the field into a new text formatter to handle all the different options and stuff like that. So as the client's getting into the content, they're realizing a lot of different changes, a lot of different things that, whether it was a misunderstanding or a miscommunication, or just they finally understand the data a little bit better, or where the data is going. We often find a lot of problems, and a quick and easy way to fix this is using these batch processes in the batch API. You can hook them up to forms, so you can have a couple different options. You click go, and it runs through it. So if you've ever seen the Drupal update, the update.php page, when you do all your updates, you get the little progress bar. That's just basically a batch process that's going on. You can send some data through your processes so you can understand what's going on. So yeah, some site migrations, content updates. We do a lot of, so again, with the headless approach, we pre-build all our image styles for certain things. We're still trying to figure this out as far as best solutions, but what we're doing at the moment is we pre-build these image styles. So we'll run a batch process to go over certain fields and create those image styles that we need for our kiosks or our other third-party stuff that we're working on. We can also combine this with cron jobs. So we can have larger cron jobs that are running, so we can schedule those to happen at 2 o'clock in the morning when no one's late, and it's a good combination for those two. And then I will mention this. So part of this too is like building your own blocks. So these are a couple things I wanted to mention, but wanted to make sure we talked about, but not talked in depth. Build your own blocks. Build your own forms. Custom forms are not too terribly hard. And they're a good thing to do. And again, cron jobs. Cron jobs, we can run these tasks in the background while the site's running. We can schedule them at certain times, do different things. So all these things, if looking into further, doing things further, getting into your code a little bit better, these are a couple good things to look at. And then always the question comes up as far as custom code versus a contrib module. This is always a question we deal with, I think, and always what I've been asked in the past. Why do a custom code versus using a contrib module, or vice versa? Sometimes a contrib module just doesn't exist, so that's obvious one reason. But then so doing custom code, we can simplify things. So if a contrib module does exist and we have this question, a lot of times we can simplify what we need with Drupal and open source community, everyone tries to be everything for everybody, which is good for a lot of stuff that's out there. But sometimes we need something very small, very specific for our project, and we can reduce a lot of that. It could be CRUD or whatever that we want that from another contrib module. And it just reduce a little bit of overhead. The cons, though, we have to deal with updates and maintenance. Like if we're going to write our own custom code, how do we handle this? Things got to update. Everything has to update. How do we? Is this going to be something that needs to be updated and maintained? And lastly, do you really know enough to do it yourself? I think that's always a big question. And in light, especially of the security updates lately, like security is a big issue. If we're doing something that has to revolve around security, do we really want to be messing with that, or should that be really a contrib module that hopefully should be updated and part of all that security stuff? So that's always a big question. A lot of times, we're just kind of like, tweaking the look of something, so it's really not too big of a deal to have this custom code. But again, if we're dealing with security, that's another side of things. And for example, so there's the save and edit module. So basically, it creates a save and edit button at the bottom of a node page. So typically, when you save, it goes out to the full view mode, or it goes back to like the content form. But one thing we tell our content authors to do a lot is just to do a small little chunk, save it, go back, edit it. So it's like going back and forth all the time is really annoying. This save and edit button just keeps you on the form, which is really nice. It's a pretty small module. It provides a number of options as well to configure it, which in my opinion was like a little bit overkill. It's like, do you want it on the left or do you want it on the right? It's great, but it's trying to be everything for everybody. Overall, though, it was a great module. I like the module. It was really cool. But looking at it, we added 2 permissions to our site. We added 1 config file and 11 total files in the module. Again, it wasn't very big. This was just a quick, simple example. But really, we probably could have done it in about 20 to 30 lines of code or less, custom code to add this in. At the end of the day, I had the module up and working and running and was fine with it. So I went with the module in this case. But the next project, I might do the 20 to 30 lines of code, add that simple submit handler on the forms. But again, it's a good module, adds a lot of stuff, but we can do it other ways. So these are a bunch of links. If you download download the GitHub repo, these are all links to a bunch of Drupal documentation. I always have a hard time finding what I want when you Google Drupal and trying to figure out these answers, but these are definitely good starts to figure out stuff. So the other thing too is I wanted to, first of all, thanks for coming, but also talk about questions, and talk about things. If there's questions, problem solving, trying to figure that kind of stuff out, I'd love to hear questions. If there's any questions about what we do and how we do it at Blue Cadet, that'd be great as well. We are hiring, so this is a picture of our office and one of the things that we do. If you're interested, please talk to me afterwards. But again, yeah, I wanted to open up to questions and hopefully talk and discuss.
So for your options fees,
yes.
Where, at what point do you intervene and use that data to manipulate your output?
So typically it's on a paragraph. Like the last stuff that we do is on the paragraph. So we have a hook preprocessed paragraph, or yes, I think it's just preprocessed paragraph. So that at that point, then we get the values of those fields. So going back to the display formatters, we don't ever display them. So Drupal doesn't run them through the whole theming pipeline. It's just we just get the values at that point. And then typically we're creating classes, or we'll show in high fields. Like that's kind of the 2 main things that we use. So we'll create those classes and add that to the paragraph bundle. So typically it's always in that preprocess function that we're getting those values and using those values. Yes?
Question about your form states.
Yes.
Where you were simplifying your forms.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned it was JavaScript. Is that just JavaScript that you added to your administrative theme, or is there like a module or something more complicated you did?
I guess I'm supposed to repeat the question. So the question is, where does all the JavaScript come from for the form states? The form states API is all part of Drupal. So all the JavaScript, that part of the JavaScript is all included in Drupal itself. It's the way, if going back to D7, the contextual fields module, they just create a UI over Drupal to do that. All you need to do for those is in your hook form alters, you add a states thing attribute to the form element itself, and that's and you basically say, hey, if this other field has this value, do something for this field, and it's pretty straightforward. But it's also, I always found it hard to like debug and figure out exactly what I needed, and there's that side of it. But you're not actually adding any of the JavaScript or doing any of the JavaScript. You're just adding those attributes to that field in the form alter. Yes.
The settings that you created for the fields, like with accessibility and stuff
Yes.
like that, those are fields within the content type itself?
Yes. Did I go past it? I lost where it was now. So we're talking about the accessibility fields themselves. Yeah, those are all on the node themselves. I try to break everything up into tabs and have a tabs thing on a larger node like that, so it's like an event node.
Actually, no. I meant the other one that where you said settings page.
Oh, this guy. Yeah. Sorry. So settings page. So a setting page is usually like I'll create like a config page that's in the config hierarchy of the Drupal. Like if you do the admin menu, it's all in the config section. So for IVC or any client, we'll have like a client tab for them, their own little block, and then we'll have, hey, this is so for the event, it was the event messaging. We called it the event messaging form. So it was just a form. It was a custom form, created through the routing for Drupal 8, and it was just text fields and icon uploads. Or file uploads for the icons, and it was a pretty straightforward, but it was a custom form for that. And then that's all saved in a config file, or saved in the Drupal state file, or Drupal state, whatever that is, Drupal state. And I can pull that in when I'm in my preprocess. I just grab those values from that state and can add that content then to my theme and to my template files. So talking about like the settings page here.
Yeah. So that's
yeah.
not actually applied to a particular node. You apply it globally.
Yeah. So on the node itself is these Boolean fields. So it's just it's a field alcohol served, for example. It's true or false. Then on the settings page, I manually kind of made the connection, but I have a field that's alcohol, and if alcohol is allowed, we have this text. And if it's not allowed, I think actually nothing shows up. But so we have the different options for that. And then on my preprocess for my node, I grab the value of that field, and then I create a new render array for the content that I actually want. So I'm not actually showing the Boolean field itself or any value in the Boolean field. I'm not sending that through the display format at all. It's just I'm adding a new whole render array to build that section of the content. Yes.
So for things like CK editor plugins and services, is there a place on, say, Drupal.org where those are shared after they've been created?
There's a couple modules out there for CK editor plugins. I looked at them to get references, but I haven't necessarily used them extensively. Most of them were specific to a certain CK editor plugin itself. But yeah, documentation, as far as I'm concerned, is lacking especially with the services CK editor plugins. I built a CK editor plugin off the CK editor tutorials and all that kind of stuff, and then I was able to plug it in by using the crap. I forget the module now. There's another module that had an example of bridging the gap, but it's another hook. Let me see in my links. Bam. I'm gonna add links to that for that, because that's actually a very good point. So there are some resources. I had a hard time finding exactly what I needed for that. So it took a little bit to kind of bridge that gap. There's a couple different spots. So you actually have your CK editor plugin that is its own thing, an own set of files, JavaScript files that have their own hierarchy. That's in a custom module that you create and then you have another hook to expose that to Drupal. So there's one hook that you expose it so you can do the little drag and drop for your WYSIWYGs, and then there's another hook that you actually allow it for the WYSIWYG editor itself when it actually loads in a page. But I'll add links to the slides if to help with that, because like I said, that one was a hard one to find the best tutorials and solutions for that. So, yeah. Anybody else? Yes.
So on the CK editor theme,
Yeah.
What's your take on spell check? Like, right?
Okay. Good question. We had a client that was insistent having spell check, and we didn't agree with them. I didn't like having spell check in there. Browsers now have enough spell check things going on. Like, your OS spell check is there, and then you have, especially for Chrome, has a couple different spell checker plugins that you can add. Having a specific spell checker for CK Editor didn't necessarily make sense to me, and it was kind of another big add-on that I just didn't understand the
That
need
was
for.
just a reality check.
Yeah. That's the conclusion that we came to. I don't know.
You can enable your browser's checker within the WYSIWYG.
Yeah.
There's a way to do that.
Well, and
Yeah, but explaining that to the client or the end, right, so it becomes, but some of the modules, the add-on spell check modules tend to push your data out to spell check it somewhere else, and then that's like a privacy, so it's just making sure I wasn't missing anything.
Yeah, that's where we landed on. This particular client was on I think it was a D6 site, so they had the whole old school spell checker where it went through and brought up the pop-up window for all the words that were misspelled, and so they wanted that exact functionality again, and we were kind of like, do you really need that though? I feel like I felt like they were stuck in the past and stuck in what they wanted to do as opposed to embracing new technology. But there's other ways of doing it. Anybody else?
All right, can I throw one more?
Yeah, go for it, yeah.
So on the contextual filters and kind of permissions then on top of that, I assume you can it's kind of just floats in there in the hook process. Do you ever do permissions to see fields or see the values of the fields?
So I'm talking about permissions on the field level itself.
For the values of the field level. So you've got rooms that you want to reserve, but you only have access to 3 of those rooms, so you don't want to show all the...
Okay.
I would assume you could do permissions?
So the contextual fields in the form states, they're not restricting your data. They're not based on permissions. Basically, I can go in there and I can show that field, and I can still edit that field. That field will get saved. So it's really kind of an overlay on top of your form to help the author. It's not going to enforce the business logic of the form itself. It helps to guide the author, but it's not going to enforce anything typically. So I would caution in that sense. If you want to get a little bit more complicated in that sense, I would look at maybe using updating your forms based on different values and permissions that way. As opposed to the form states themselves. Just because the form states, if you have to enforce that logic, I wouldn't do the form states, put it that way. Anybody else? Yeah.
So your display formatters are similar in nature to the preprocessor, but it's reusable. And then there is a template involved with that. Do you create a template for the preprocessor that you write, or is it a general template? And how much do you make changes in those templates?
Gotcha. Okay, a lot of questions. So the display formatters and your templates. We'll start with the first question.
So I'm
trying to
general question about the interaction between your display formatters and the templates.
Yes. So when I create there's a couple different ways that you can do it. So it's building a render array typically in your display formatter. It might be calling another theme or a custom theme that you might develop for that, or it's building its own markup in itself. So it's either like building a markup string, or it's going to call another theme. So you have two different options that way. A lot of times I'll create my own themes because again, with those buttons, we're always doing hover states and we're doing load-in sequences, so we always have to have more classes and more things than we need by default. So I'll create my own custom theme for a lot of that stuff. Yeah, so it's building up that render array, however you want to do it. If you want to call another theme, a lot of times the logic that we do in that is more of showing, hiding stuff, all that kind of stuff. But trying to figure out how to answer your question better. Sorry.
So you have a template. That
Yeah.
is going to render those fields. So you create templates in your module, or do you put them in the theme?
I usually do display format. Yeah, they're all in modules. They have to be in the module. So yeah, here, let's start with this. So we always have a custom module. It always ends up, we'll have so for IVC, we have IVC utility module. That's what we always call it. So we'll build it's always something utility, or whatever our client is utility. And then, so we'll create that display formatter class. Typically, I like doing the themes. That's just usually the way I do it. If I'm copying something from core that's not using a theme, if it's just building a render array, maybe that'll be what happens. But I usually like creating themes. So I'll put that base template class, template file in the module, and then the front-end developers can create the theme in the theme itself and override it. Yeah. They can do whatever they want with it at that point.
That's the best place to interact with the front-end developers and their structure and whatnot in the templates.
Yeah. That's
control over formatting and everything.
Yes. Yeah, I give you as much data as I want to give you, or how much you want to need and want to work with, and then they can create the markup and do the template the way they want to do it. Cool. So. Anybody else? Sorry, this is like a really choppy talk, and I was curious how it was going to go, but I think there's just a lot of things out there that I see a lot of younger developers not really knowing that's out there yet, I like passing on that knowledge and hopefully taking things one step deeper, more optimized, hopefully, ideally cleaner code and getting more into this kind of stuff. So again, my email address was up there. If you ever want to contact me, feel free. Yeah. Let's just do this. That's that one. Thank you very much. And I'll be around all day too. If you want to grab me and talk about something, feel free. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
So I saw your style options that you have.
Yes.
At Nashville, I saw a modifier module.
Okay. Modifier module.
Yeah, check it out. Modifiers, I think. Same thing. I haven't used it yet, but we do the same kind of style stuff on our paragraph bundles, and I'm gonna check that out.
All right. Yeah. Does it do you know what it does?
It lets you define classes that you use in your paragraphs and the templates in the display.
Interesting. I'll have to look that.
Yeah, I'm curious how they built it compared to just doing it yourself. Right?
Yeah.
It's pretty simple.
A lot of times I get I just do my development and code, and I stop looking at new modules and stuff. And then someone's like, "Oh, there's this module out there." I was like, "Oh yeah, I didn't know about that. I knew. I just didn't want to use that one." Yeah. So that's cool though.
Awesome.
That's
thanks.
Yeah, Rob, thank you.
I'm Brad DeForest. I'm the back office thinker.
Oh yeah.
We're going to be meeting this week.
Sweet.
Yeah,
Awesome.
so I figured it might as well be.
Yeah.
I'm the creative director.
Okay. Great.
So with IVC.
IVC. Yeah. That's. I was trying. Sorry. Well, I get nervous.
We're inheriting it.
Yeah. That's awesome. Oh, I'm glad to
So now,
you guys.
now I got a little background on it before we meet.
There you go. IVC has been a fun site. It's been good to work on.
Cool.
Pretty cool. So hopefully,
Hopefully you come to the idea of for the next developer.
Yeah.
Not that I'm a developer, but I know it's
I would love to hear more of what happens afterwards. And I tried to think about that stuff, and then I wonder really in the real world how good it is or not, and how easy it is to work with later on. I've dealt with some pretty crazy sites. Curious how crazy ours are sometimes.
well, we've inherited a few.
Yeah. What did we inherit before?
Longwood Gardens,
Oh, okay.
which was probably before. That was when you guys were still farming it out.
Yeah.
Which I'm glad you guys are doing it.
Yeah, how bad was that?
Yeah, it was bad. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't aligned with the client. I mean, it still isn't.
It's the
Moved it in a direction, but first still not where it needs to be.
Gotcha.
But yeah, what else? Well, we did the support on IDC
So you're down
a while back.
Yeah.
So that one.
I'm down there at 14.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is right.
This one sounds like
Me to come to a little bit there. And
Hope so. Yeah, again, I'd love to hear feedback.
There's one downtown, and then there's one in northern.
I'm sure I'll have a lot of questions.
Yeah, no, we're doing
It's a long. Getting down to
doing the other side of it too.
I still
Figure out how all that's going to
That's a good
Right. Like the gift shop?
It's a good.
work.
We got a good one. We'd love to
I'm
have
not
you.
sure.
Yeah, probably maybe the gift. Yeah, probably the gifting.
Yeah.
Side of
All
it. So I know we're working on it.
Yeah, we have it down at Phillipsburg.
Yes, yeah.
So it's at
Awesome. Good to meet you in person.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk to you. Yeah, you do.
So
What's the missing part? Is it like these are the things which are not available and you are doing it in a different?
No,
Sorry.
no, it's fine. It's kind of it might be mistitled a little bit, but it was more of stuff that as we train new developers and stuff, they don't necessarily pick up on this as quickly and easily. So it's kind of stuff that if you're diving into Drupal, I want to make sure people understand that this stuff is out there, that they can look at new stuff, new technologies, like new parts of it. They know that this stuff is available, and it's just sometimes harder, and they don't always see it to begin with.
So these things are all available?
Everything's available in Drupal. A lot of it, again, is that custom code. Like you have to develop it yourself. But these are different options and methodologies that we've done at Looking at that help us do what we do. Yeah, no problem.
That is something like I don't understand why it is named that.
Gotcha. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, no worries.
all right, great. See you.
Thank you. No problem. Thanks for being here.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Where is your presentation going to be?
It's going to be at that GitHub.
link?
Yeah, github.com pinvt d8 missing parts there.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yeah, based on the questions and stuff, I might update a couple of the links and stuff like that. So at the end of the day, hopefully there'll be a few more things up there.
Okay, you have